Listen up or run for cover. Dropping knowledge from the people who have it to the people who need it. The real Brad Lea is dropping
What it is, Brad Lea back again with another episode of Dropping Bombs. Today in the studio, I've got an actual factual treat for you. I know you've heard of him, and if you haven't, you're about to. Michael Chandler, what's cracking with you?
What's up, man? Just down here in beautiful Florida, getting ready for my next fight.
Dude, listen, if you guys don't know who this dude is, go check him out on IG at MIKECHANDLERMMA. You probably already do know who he is because he's like a freaking Bellator champion. He's like three-time Bellator champion. He bailed on the out of Bellator into the UFC, lightweight contender. If I have, predictions, and I do, I would see very soon you're going to see him as a UFC champion. And man, I tell you, dude, I love MMA. When did you get into that?
I got into it at 22 years old, right after I graduated college. Graduated college in 2009. May of 2009, I fought my first fight in August of 2009. Wasn't sure if I'd stick with it, and turns out I made a career of it, a long career of it thus far, 11 years, and haven't looked back since. So 22 years old. Now,
you didn't have any fear of fighting whatsoever?
No, I didn't. Actually, I don't want to say wrestling was harder because obviously, there's more injuries, more pain, a less of a rule set in mixed martial arts because you can punch, kick, knee, elbow, all those things you can't do in wrestling. But, I've been doing hand-to-hand combat since I was 14 years old. Me versus another man, my weight, 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 referee, a rule set, and we find out who the better man is. Obviously, adding in cuts, bruises, blood, broken bones, those kinds of things happen in mixed martial arts. But no, man, I love the competition of it. It's not emotional for me. It's just it's competition. It's A plus B, and we figure out who's going to win.
So you started out as a wrestler.
Wrestled in high school, then wrestled in college, and then 2 guys that I wrestled with, actually, who were like my big brothers, kind of my mentors, was Tyron Woodley, who went into the UFC, became the UFC champion, and then Ben Askren, who was another teammate of mine. They both started fighting. Ben Askren won the Bellator title. He won the ONE FC title. Then he went to the UFC as well. And truthfully, I just figured I'd follow in their footsteps. I graduated in 2009. Wasn't ready to just jump into the workforce. I knew the wrestling dream wasn't really going to be very fruitful for me because it's in retrospect, or in a nutshell, it's much harder to make that Olympic wrestling team for the US than it is to be successful in mixed martial arts. And I was ready for a change. I wanted to try my hand at unarmed combat in a cage, and haven't looked back since.
Now, when you were 14 years old, where were you growing up?
Grew up in south of St. Louis, Missouri, small town called High Ridge, Missouri, Jefferson County, Missouri. And, I was your typical Midwest small guy from a small town who was taught to do small things, and wrestled all throughout high school. Never really reached my goal of becoming a state champion. Took second my senior year. And that's kind of how I got into wrestling. I was small, so I wasn't going to be dunking basketballs, or I wasn't going to be, getting a football scholarship. So wrestling, 103 pounds as a freshman, and fighting, clawed my way on the wrestling mat into the state finals my senior year, and turned that into a college wrestling career.
What would you say your family was? Middle class?
Yeah, we grew up very middle class. Mom and dad, my dad's a union carpenter, still is to this day. My mom was a secretary, kind of ran my grandfather's businesses. He had a scrap metal business there in High Ridge, Missouri, and then he had a restaurant. So my mom was working scrap metal business during the day, my grandpa's restaurant at night. My dad was working 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. every day in his carpenter's whites and his work boots and his lunch pail and his coffee, and woke up every morning at 5 a.m. So I very quickly had that example of what hard work looked like, hard work and sacrifice. And we didn't have a lot, but we had everything that we needed.
Yeah. So, Christmas presents on the under the tree every year, that type of thing.
Yeah, we had Christmas presents. We had, and I think the biggest thing is we had the security of mom and dad who they truly did everything that they possibly could to give me and my two brothers every opportunity that they didn't have. You know, they both started working at 16, 17, 18 years old, all the way into their 40s, 50s, 60s now. And, you know, that has been one of the driving forces. You know, I want to carry this blue collar work ethic all the way from High Ridge, Missouri, into Mizzou with the Division I wrestling, straight into the world ranks, the worldwide ranks of mixed martial arts. That, you know, a small guy from a small town who was taught to do small things cannot listen to those small voices and take a chance on yourself. I walked on to the University of Missouri and, you know, had to scrape and claw to get onto the team, and then became an All-American in 2009. Now
your parents were kind of, you know, let's say hardworking individuals. What got you into the bigger mindset? Why didn't I always wonder why people that have, like my parents sound like yours. So I always wondered why my parents didn't ever think bigger or try more or do more. What do you think causes people just to get that job, work 20 years, retire with a little bit of money?
Well, I think I think certainty of a certain level of you know, putting yourself out there is better than the uncertainty of falling flat on your face. You know, I was very much surrounded by a lot of people who said, don't go outside those county lines, because outside those county lines, the chances of you failing are way too high, and failure is the worst thing in the world. And the older you get, and you would agree with me, that failure is one of the best things that you can possibly have in your life. Failure is one of the best catalysts for growth. And I was afraid of failure for a really long time. It hindered me in my high school wrestling career. And truthfully, I had to make a choice, and I don't know why I made this choice. I just thank God every day that I did. But I had scholarship offers from Division III, Division II, NAIA, junior college schools, full rides, you know, and there was that little bit of guilt that said, man, why am I going to go Division I and walk onto the Mizzou wrestling team and then incur this debt that my parents will have to pay back, or I might have to pay back later, when I can just take this smaller school offer, full ride for a smaller school? But something in me said, Michael, if you go and you do that and you become a national champion, Division III or Division II, or one of these, you know, smaller schools, then you're always going to wonder what if. And something inside me said, hey man, just go take that chance on yourself, bet on yourself. And walked on to Mizzou, and then ended up having success and becoming an All-American. But I don't know. It was just rampant among everybody that I grew up around. And they're not bad people. I don't fault them for it. It's a lack of thinking bigger and thinking outside the box, and almost a looking down upon people who do think too big. You know, I come from a place where if you had a nice car, immediately people would say something like, oh, that's a waste of money, you know, or if you had a nicer house than you probably should, or a nicer house than them, that's a waste of money, or they're house poor, or they're this or that. And then the older you get, it wasn't until I got into college and I was surrounded by people. Like my Bible study leader was an orthopedic surgeon, a partner in an orthopedic surgery center, and making a lot of money, but also serving young men. And I saw the way he served his wife, and I saw the way he served his daughters. And I started to realize, wait a second, this whole idea that the rich are somehow bad, or the rich are somehow lesser of people, lesser integrity, lesser character, lesser philanthropy than the people who are the hardworking, turn the other cheek, kind of, oh, woe is me kind of generation. You know, I just started to flip that up on top of its head and realize that, man, I was created to do great things. I was created to get as many resources and create as much wealth, both financially and spiritually and relationship wise, as possible, because that's God's best for me. And when I get to that point, then I can serve other people, because you can't serve people when you're down at the bottom. You got to serve people from the top.
Amen. Hey, and it's funny that you say that, because I dropped a bomb on that. Most people are afraid of failure, when failure is actually what you want, what you need, is assuming you learn from it. Because like right now, I can tell you that you failed at MMA more than I have.
Yeah.
Now, if someone says, well, how's that possible, dude? The dude's a Bellator champion. Well, I've never done MMA. Okay. So you failed more than me. You've lost more fights. You've whatever you've done, you've failed more than me in MMA. So that just goes to show, how is a champion at the top of his game, how did that person fail more than me, who's not a champion? Well, because the failure and the drive is why you're a champion. Now, some people fail and they give up, and that's not a winning combination. Now, why do people fail? Here's what I think. Tell me if you agree with this. Most people fail because they're afraid of what other people think. They're worried about what someone else is going to think. Like, hey, what if I go take this deal at Mizzou and I don't win? So they just don't at all. And so they just don't try, fearing other people's judgment. What do you think of that?
Absolutely. And that's it becomes even more and more of a trap as these generations move forward with the social media age, with the internet age. There's so many people. I mean, I could tell you right now, even me going from Bellator, which is the number 2 organization in the world, much smaller than the UFC, coming over to the UFC, the amount of hate, the amount of criticism, the amount of comments that just start pouring in immediately. It's like people just want to talk about you, whether they know you or they don't. You know, maybe people haven't seen me fight at all, but immediately they write me off. And I think the biggest the biggest aspect of it is worrying way too much about what people think. And that's really honestly what I did. And that was the biggest thing holding me back. And I just thank God every day that I didn't listen to them and I took a chance. Maybe it was a self-sabotaging. Maybe even part of me said, hey, I'm going to go ahead and do that because what people also do is sometimes they set their goals so high on purpose because they know that they're not going to ever reach that point. And it's a way that they self-sabotage themselves as well. Maybe I had a little bit of that, but somehow my emotional and inside of me maturity caught up with the physical attributes. And I was able to turn it into a working recipe for success at Mizzou, walking onto the Division I team. But from where I come from, yes, there was a lot of people who they love to sit on the sidelines. It's the old man in the arena quote by Theodore Roosevelt. It's not the critics who count, but it's the man inside the arena. And I love being inside the arena. I love, obviously as painful as it is, failure is the catalyst for growth that we all need. And if you fear failure, then you're never going to find God's best for your life.
Yeah. And you mentioned God a lot. I know that you're faith-based. Where'd you get that from? Did you just grow up that way?
I grew up Catholic, so I got my, first Holy Communion, and I did the confirmation and did the PSR, public school religion, every Monday night until I got confirmed. And then it wasn't till a guy named Kenny Bowen, who was on my high school wrestling team, invited me to church. And I went to kind of my first non-denominational spirit-filled church there in called Twin Rivers Worship Center in St. Louis, Missouri, that I really started seeing these young men and young women just have a different relationship with Christ, a different relationship, a deeper relationship. And that's when I really got saved, when I was 15 years old. Because before that, it was just religion. It was just, hey, I have to do this. You're a young kid and you're like, gosh, mom and dad are making me go do this thing. And they're making me go to mass and they're making me go to the Catholic church. And then I started to kind of take my spiritual life into my own hands as a teenager, as a 15-year-old, and carried that on now I'm almost 35 years old, and there's a lot of ups and a lot of downs. And that's one of the craziest things about, your Christian walk is it ain't all sunshine and rainbows, and you got to praise him in the storms. You got to praise him in the good times. And it's something that has grounded me in a sport that is so painful at times, but also so blissful at times, and everything in between. So
how does God feel about you beating the shit out of other people?
It's such a great question, because it truly is. I mean, I've spoken at more men's conferences and churches than I have than I have in the secular realm, in the business world, or in other places. There's pastors out there who, for me, mixed martial arts is that shiny object. Okay. It's number one, it's cool if you like it. People are drawn to it, whether you love it or hate, whether you love fighting or hate fighting, you're drawn to it, because I think all of us have, you go back to John Eldredge's book, wild at heart. Every man needs an adventure to have, a battle to fight, and a beauty to win. So all of us men, especially, and that's why I love my platform. I just looked at my Instagram 2 days ago. I have 92% men following me. So I know my message is towards men especially, but every man has a battle that they want to fight inside of them. So whether they love fighting or hate fighting, they're drawn to it no matter what. And the amount of pastors who have reached out to me in the churches that I've spoken at, and men's conferences that I've spoken at, there's always people who are like, well, you're a Christian. What about, turning the other cheek? Hey, what about loving thy neighbor as you love thyself? And truthfully, number one, I would say I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but who is anybody to question somebody's calling? The Apostle Paul said, I have become all things to all men so that I may save a few. Granted, there's people who say, hey man, this guy shouldn't be fighting people. He shouldn't be hurting people inside of the cage. But for me, I know it's a vehicle for me to live my life a certain way, to have a platform, to be looked at in a certain light, so that hopefully parents say, I want my son to grow up to be like him. Or parents are saying, I want my daughter to marry a man like that. Or or other young men say, man, I want to be like that. Man, that guy, he's a badass. He gets into fights in the cage and he's got this status and he's got this platform, a lot of what the world wants, but internally, being able to speak my mind with my platform. And, so it's always an interesting question, kind of mixing the two, but, it's a way for me to speak my mind and speak about my faith, and also just speak about being a real normal human being here on this earth.
Well, I would say you're normal by any stretch of the imagination.
I try to be.
Well, because I follow you and I know you got a freaking kid, you got a wife, you're like a good dude all the way around. The fact that you whip people's asses, I think, is more of a competitive thing. But I've always wondered, because if you got in a ring, you believe Jesus is on your side, correct? That's a hard question, because I do believe, just like we said, failure is part of life. Right. And I do think that and this is how I turned the corner when it came to failure, because you always worried about the bad things happening. Right. So in a fight, losing a fight, that's a bad thing. Right. But if bad things happen, but a good thing comes of it, was it really a bad thing, or was it really just part of the process? So I do believe, that I have Jesus on my side, but I also know that I never ask for the win. I ask for me to show up and put my best foot forward and have the best performance that I possibly can. And the wins and the losses are in God's hand at that point. I'm not gonna just sit here and say I don't need to train, and I don't need to do my diet right, and I don't need to do this and don't need to do that right, because really the outcome is in God's hands. But truthfully, I want to leave no stone unturned in my preparation. I want to do everything right. I want to live with conviction, train with conviction, push myself every single day, show up on fight night, put my best foot forward, try my best, try my hardest, have a relentless spirit inside the cage. And if I win, I win. If I lose, I lose. And it's all part of the process. So I would say that Jesus is on my side. But also, even if I lose, Jesus is still on my side. And it doesn't mean that he wasn't on my side if I do lose, I guess, if that makes sense. Nice. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I'm just asking questions because I like to ask questions. But if my listeners were here, they would want to know. I've always wondered, when you see two people in a ring, they're both thanking Jesus and thanking God, and then one loses. It's like, well, wait a minute. Did God like that one better? I didn't really figure out that. Or maybe we put someone that's Christian in a ring against a Muslim, and then if the Muslim wins, what's that mean? And then you get someone Jewish in the ring, like, what's that mean? To where obviously there's been two people in a ring, both of them faith-based, and one obviously has to lose. So I don't think it has anything to do with your faith. I think it has to do with your preparation. And again, I think you're right. God's going to love you either way, but I don't think he's helping people win and not helping people win. First of all, we're technically all his children. So you also pointed out that when you said you don't look for the win, you just pray to show up and do the right things, which is basically, I don't know if you've ever read, I forget the book, a guest the other day told me about it, but that's winning, praying to win, setting a goal to win is a lagging indicator. You know what you ever read that?
I haven't read that. No.
A lagging indicator is when you set goals for a result to happen, which means something needs to happen for that goal to happen. Like, for example, I want to set a goal to lose 20 pounds. If I lost 20 pounds, that's a lagging indicator, which means whatever I did, the result is behind what I did. Instead of setting goals for lagging indicators, you set goals for the leading indicator, like what's going to make you lose weight. Don't have a goal of losing 30 pounds. Have a goal of running every day. Don't have a goal of losing 30 pounds. Have a goal of eating better, because those are leading indicators that will cause that. And too many people set goals for lagging indicators.
Yep. And it sets up and it's hard to measure it, right? So if you say, I want to lose 20 pounds, your demeanor and your attitude that day depends on whether or not what the scale said 0.8, you were 0.8 heavier, or you were 0.8 lighter or whatnot. It's kind of like what Drew Brees, the, quarterback for the New Orleans Saints, always talks about winning the day. So your goal is to lose 20 pounds, but how do you win today? And I think that goes back to, my prayer before a fight isn't, let me win this fight. Let me just win the day. And by winning the day, it's me going out there and performing at my best and leaving the outcome up to wherever the chips fall, and that's kind of how I've always done it. And at the end of the day, I always just say, thank you, Lord, for this opportunity, because every single fight, win, lose, or draw, is an opportunity. And even like what you said too, I'll tell you what's one of the most interesting kind of points in my career. The biggest opportunity of my life up to that point, I was going to fight at Madison Square Garden. Madison Square Garden, you got a couple places that you really want to fight as a mixed martial artist. You want to fight in LA in front of a huge crowd. You want to fight, but the big mecca is Madison Square Garden. So biggest opportunity of my life. I'm defending my lightweight title, and I'm warming up in the same locker room that Muhammad Ali warmed up in, warming up in the same locker room that Mike Tyson warmed up in, walking the same hallways. It's like the mecca of combat sports. I go out there, roll my ankle in the first minute, and I end up getting, doctor stoppage finished in the first round. The fight didn't even start, and it was pretty much over. I took a weird step back, rolled my ankle. The fight ends up ending. It was probably the worst luck that you could possibly have, but I got more admiration for the way that I fought through it, the way I was still trying to fight. After the fight, I got on the mic and said I was willing to cut my leg off to continue to move forward. I got more fans, more respect, more notoriety in that loss, in that unfortunate circumstance than I'd have any other dominant win in my career. So you also just got to also pull yourself back and look at your career, your industry, what you're trying to do from a 30,000 foot view sometimes, and not just say each thing that happens to me, win, lose, or draw. It's all part of this big process that we call, for me, a mixed martial arts career. For you, it's business and building businesses. And because you're going to have wins and losses every single day, and not letting those affect your mood, not letting those affect your faith moving forward.
Dude, I got a bunch of questions, MMA, then I'm going to get off MMA a little bit. When they pour the water on the mat, you always see them pour the water on the mat. What's that for?
Yep. Great question. So we're fighting on a canvas, and it's a brand new canvas every single fight. Obviously, for sanitary reasons, you can't have blood and sweat on a canvas, and they can't just put it on the next week. So it's a brand new canvas. You got the logos on there. You'd be very surprised how slippery it is because it's dry. I can't think of any other materials, but certain materials need to be wet to get more grip. So you'll see me maybe take a drink a little bit, spit it on the ground, put your feet on it. So you want the bottom of your feet wet, because of the more wet the bottom of your feet are. It sounds counterintuitive because you think, the bottom of my feet are wet, so they're going to be more slippery. But on the canvas, wet feet, sweaty feet are give you much more grip, because obviously you don't want to be slipping around out there.
All right, and then. Who would you want to fight if you could pick anybody in the UFC to fight?
The great thing about coming over to the UFC in the lightweight division right now is the lightweight division is the most electrifying it's been in a long time. You got Khabib Nurmagomedov, who is 29-0, the greatest lightweight of all time. He hasn't even ever looked like he's even lost a round. And then you have Conor McGregor, who has a couple losses. He's not as good as Khabib. Khabib beat him, but also Conor McGregor is the biggest money fight, the biggest amount of eyeballs that you could possibly have. And you got a couple other guys in there who are just studs as well. From a business standpoint, you want to fight Conor because that's how you make the most money. But from a competitor standpoint, as an athlete standpoint, I want to fight Khabib. Khabib Nurmagomedov is the pound for pound best fighter in the world. He just so happens to be a lightweight. He just so happens to be undefeated. And he just so happens to have the same strength as I do, which is wrestling and grappling. And I think my wrestling and grappling would negate that. So if I get the opportunity to get into that UFC octagon, win my first fight, win my second fight, maybe get that UFC title shot against Khabib Nurmagomedov.
I thought he retired.
He did. So that's what also made this whole thing kind of interesting. So when I signed with the UFC, I got offered Dustin Poirier. He said no. I got offered Tony Ferguson. He said no. For October 24th, I was going to be the co-main event under Khabib versus Justin Gaethje. I came in, I was the backup, so to speak, because right now in the COVID era, anybody can take a nasal swab, test positive for COVID, and the fight's off. So they needed another lightweight on the card. I went out there, I made weight, did my job. A fight didn't transpire, but I was there in the arena that night that Khabib beat Justin Gaethje in the second round, finished him, and then retired. And
was you hoping Gaethje got COVID?
It was so hard, right? Because number one, I'm brand newly signed to the UFC. So the last thing I want to do is be out there in the media. I hope one of these guys breaks their hand or gets COVID or something, because that would be bad luck befalling my new employer. But it's the fight business, and crazy things are happening.
Yeah, but what if he would have got sick, dude, and you would have walked out there and knocked out Khabib?
Trust me, I visualized it 1,000 times, and then I also visualized, Khabib possibly getting hurt and me having to step in to fight Gaethje. So I was prepared and I was ready to do it. And it was a great platform, a great way to introduce me to the UFC fans. And then now I'm probably going to hopefully have my UFC debut sometime in February, maybe. Who
will you fight?
So as of right now, we don't have an opponent. There's some speculation going around that there's a fight, the number 6 guy, Dan Hooker. I know right now, myself and the UFC, we're working on Justin Gaethje, who is the number 1, number 2 guy in the world after Khabib. He just lost to Khabib. He was a guy similar to myself. Number 1, he and I are cut from the same cloth. He's a middle-class, small-town American wrestler. We ran in the same circles growing up. We were in the same weight class in college, and then now he's fighting for the UFC title a couple months ago, and he's now in my weight class. He came over from the from the World Series of Fighting, which is an outside organization. He came over to the UFC, fought a top 5 guy right away. So I just hope he extends that same courtesy to me and steps into the octagon with me and gives me a top 5 opponent right away, hopefully January, February.
So who decides this, Dana?
It's Dana, of course. He's the head guy. Hunter Campbell is his number 2 in command. And then you got Sean Shelby and Mick Maynard, who are the matchmakers, but Sean Shelby is the matchmaker, the guy. And I will tell you this, you being a guy who runs a big company with a lot of employees, and I came from Bellator, great organization. They put on great shows, but they had a very small crew of people, a skeleton crew of sorts, keep their expenses low and put on fights. The UFC is the exact opposite. On Fight Island, they had like 80 employees out there, 30 people on security, like just a crazy amount it was crazy to see the difference between the mixed martial arts organization of Bellator and the mixed martial arts organization of the UFC. What Dana White has created and started since 1993 and bootstrapped this entire industry, quarterbacked this entire industry, is nothing short of amazing. It's really, really cool to see. And so they got a ton of stuff going on. They're worldwide. They're putting on tons of fights. They put on 40 something shows this year. And this was a year in which the NFL shut down, NBA shut down, MLB shut down. All your major sports organizations were shutting down. They took a lot of backlash. And here you got this guy who said, no, we're pressing forward. We're going onward. And so they got a ton of stuff going on. They're making those decisions, and they got a lot bigger decisions to worry about than just my fight. But hopefully I get that fight soon.
I think you're going to, dude. I'm telling you, I've got intuition. One time I was walking through a casino with my wife. We stopped at a roulette table. I told her 5 numbers in a row that hit. I could just see things. I see you being a freaking UFC champion, bro. I also see you being a popular champion because you're not the loudmouth, drinking, womanizing. And again, there's nothing wrong with these people. They just, I believe they just got their priorities mixed up. But, you know, you're like a classy, God-fearing husband. Your son, you adopted your son, yes?
Yep. Yeah. Almost, a little over 3 years ago. He'll be 4 in January. So,
you know, so it's like, dude, the whole world's going to be rooting for you. I just hope you don't get in there with Khabib and he knocks your ass out.
I hope so too, right? That's always the goal.
And then what happens? Like, do you go fight some more and get another chance? Because eventually, like, dude, you only fight somebody a couple times, they knock you out both times, dude. You're pretty much done with them, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean that's the beautiful thing about getting the opportunity to fight Khabib. If you look at the landscape of the lightweight division, Khabib's at the top, and he's already fought Justin Gaethje and beat him. He beat Dustin Poirier. He beat Conor McGregor. He's basically already beaten everybody in the top 5 besides 1 or 2 guys and myself. And then so really at that point, it just depends on who gives him the best test. So the prospect of me fighting him is pretty high, and I will be prepared, put my best foot forward, and hey, may the best man win. That'll be another, like you said, Jesus, Christian versus Muslim. And at the end of it all, like you said, taking religion out of it, I don't think Allah is, on his side, and obviously Allah is on his side, but the religion doesn't matter. It's just 2 guys and going after it.
I in my opinion, because again, I'm still seeking in the religion department, I think Allah and our God is the same. We just don't know it.
Mm-hmm. Possible.
It has to be. There's there's like a line of truth in all of it. So I'm thinking like there's the truth, and then all the fragmentations created all the, diversity. Anyway, we'll get into a religious discussion one of these other days. Why didn't Dustin Poirier want to fight? Why did they say no? I've heard people say, I asked him, he didn't want to. Is it because wasn't enough money, or because they're technically, I don't want to get my ass kicked?
I don't think in this industry, I think you're naive and somewhat elementary to ever say one of these guys is afraid to fight me. These are world-class athletes. These are the best guys in the entire world. Every single guy on that UFC roster is legitimate. And then once you start getting into the top 10, top 5, these guys are just animals and they're not afraid of anybody. So these guys aren't afraid to fight me. Sometimes it's a business decision.
Because as we know, Dustin's fighting Conor next weekend, I think.
Yeah, which works out absolutely. So it all worked out absolutely perfect for Dustin Poirier. He said no to my fight. Makes sense. I came in with a lot of hype, but not the biggest name. I'm a champion, 3-time champion in another organization. But if you haven't done it in the UFC, it's it's a wild card, and it's a scary fight to take from a business standpoint, because it doesn't matter how good I am or not good I am. You're taking a large amount of risk every single time you step into that octagon, every single time you step in to a fight, man. You could slip on a banana peel, you get tied onto a tornado, and you just have to be okay with the uncertainty that's about to happen. As we said, just like my Madison Square Garden incident, went out there within 1 minute, I was basically a sitting duck on one leg, and he loses to me. He loses that top ranking that he has. So you have to be calculated once you get to the top, because these guys are always jockeying for position for the big money fight. It worked out really well for Dustin. Now he gets the big money fight. He gets the Conor fight. It didn't exactly work out well for a guy named Tony Ferguson, who said no to my fight. We were supposed to fight October 24th. He said no. He ends up fighting in December. He loses. Now a guy named Charles Oliveira leapfrogs him. So that was a bad decision. So you can make bad decisions, bad business decisions, and the fans just want you to fight. That's the thing. You get so much hate. You just gotta be a man and go out there and just get into a fight. And it's like, well, you got to make a smart business decision. You have to be somewhat calculated and jockey for position when you get to the top ranks of the UFC, of these UFC divisions, or else you make a bad decision. So I think it was me coming in as an outsider, not a lot of upside to beating me, a lot of downside if you lose to me. So I respect their decision, and I'll get a fight. And once I get that first fight, I get that first win, it's off to the races.
Now, what kind of cash does a fighter get in a fight like that?
Man, it's I'll tell you what, there's a large discrepancy from the bottom of the barrel to the top. If you're a big time pay-per-view draw for the UFC, you got, a guy like Conor, he's a minimum $1 million buy kind of, or million buy million pay-per-view buy guy. He's pulling in upwards of 10 million in a fight. But then you got guys at the very bottom who are making 8,000 to show up, and then an $8,000 win bonus if they win. And then there's everything in between. You know, a guy like myself who, you know, I built my name outside of the UFC. I was doing pretty well in Bellator, and then came over, and now I'm a big name signing for the UFC, and then I need to come in and prove my worth. But it's a war of attrition, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I tell all these guys, of course, you might make a very little amounts of money in the very beginning, but eventually, if you do the right thing for long enough and you prove yourself to be a good employee, the reason I'm in my position is I proved myself to be a good employee. I was an indispensable asset to another organization, which made me a hot commodity for another organization, and they were willing to pull me over and give me a great offer, and I took it. And so you can make millions. I think Conor made like 30 something million last year, but this is also the guy who fought Floyd Mayweather and made 80 to 100 million the year before. So if you're a pay-per-view draw, you fight for that UFC title. If you hold that UFC title, you get pay-per-view bonuses. You can get up into a couple million.
Do you ever feel like you have to have a mouth on you to get that kind of popularity?
You know, the funny thing, and I will say this, and I love how it all played out. I love how the dust settled. You know, I've been at the top. I've been considered kind of one of the top lightweights in the world, not necessarily in the top 1, 2, or 3, but I've always been in the picture of one of the top lightweights in the world since 2011, when I beat a guy named Eddie Alvarez, who was the number 3 ranked guy in the world. So I've always been up there in that upper echelon of the lightweights, and I've had an opportunity every single time my Bellator contract it was going to expire. What do I just tear up the contract, do a new contract with Bellator, or do I test free agency and move on to take an offer from the UFC or these other organizations? That was one of the biggest things that hindered me from wanting to go to the UFC. Seeing what Conor was doing, seeing what these other guys were doing. I'm not a 3-piece suit, wear sunglasses inside, spitting, cussing, getting into altercations in hotels. I'm not that guy. It's not who I'm going to be. It's not who I am, both internally and externally. And if I have to do that in front of the camera to get some more pay-per-view buys, I'm not going to perform at my best when I step inside that cage, because I'm not where I need to be mentally. So that was always the biggest drawback, at least in my mind, that I thought I had to go to if I went to the UFC, I had to turn into that. I signed with the UFC within the first couple of weeks. I have a couple of conversations with Dana White, and he is over the moon happy with the response of the fans and the UFC staff and the mixed martial arts landscape, and how well I was being received as just being me, and it was funny. I called my mentor one day and I said, Hey Chris, I really think this whole, just being me, being the nice guy thing is going to work, because people are liking it. They're calling it, using words like it's a breath of fresh air. It's a nice change of pace from what they have seen, because, you can tell when people are forcing it. You can tell when people are playing a character. You can tell when people are acting outside of their true character. And then eventually you just get worn down by wearing this mask of who you think you have to be in front of the cameras. And then it eats away at you, and you fall hard. And that fall from grace is a lot harder than a guy like myself, who I just want to be myself. I want to speak my truths. I want to have my platform. I want to reach the people I want to reach. Win, lose, or draw, I'm proud of the platform that I'm building. So I don't feel like I have to do that. And I'm very happy that I don't have to do that, because I wouldn't perform well if I did.
Yeah. And it sounds like it would go against your integrity anyway.
It's true. I mean, it's the same. And it's the same thing in any other aspect of life. Pretending that you are someone that you're not, it just always ends up working out bad in the end, especially when you talk about being in front of the camera, when the stakes are high and there's money on the line and there's a fight on the line. I'm a non-confrontational kind of guy. I fight in a cage for a living, but I had never been in a physical altercation, never been in a fight outside of a cage before I started fighting. I wasn't a guy who grew up. Some of these guys, bless their hearts, they grew up in the streets. They grew up fighting. They grew up, getting picked on, and they grew up, fighting in the backyards, and fighting was a way of their life. And they decided, hey, I might as well get paid for it. I wasn't that guy. I don't like confrontation. At heart, I'm a non-confrontational guy, as much of an oxymoron as that sounds like. So I don't want confrontation. I don't want the physical altercations until I step inside that cage. I flip that switch. I turn into Michael Chandler, the fighter, and I go out there and I want to rip a guy limb from limb. And then afterwards, pick him up off the ground, shake his hand, get my hand raised, say, thank you, God, for this opportunity, kiss my wife, collect my paycheck, and move forward.
Amen. See, that was my next question. I was always wondering, like, maybe if you were at a bar or a restaurant and someone was rude and they didn't really know who you were and they got a little bit lippy because you're not a real big dude, you know. But, you know, the thing is you got that cauliflower ear on this one. Like anytime somebody, and this is for the Bomb Squad listening, anytime you see their ear and it's all cauliflowered up, dude, trust me, you don't mess with those people.
It's true. It's true. And I would say that about my college wrestling teammates. I've witnessed and been around a lot of interesting scenarios when I saw one of my wrestler buddies fly off the handle and go beat up a couple dudes at one time. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm glad I wasn't involved in that one. And I'm going home.
So you've never been wrongly messed with at a public outing?
No, I really haven't. And that's and I appreciate that question because I get that question all the time. It's true. Like, did anybody ever, they see your ears and they get mouthy because they get liquid courage and they want to fight you. And I'm like, no, not really. Well, number one, I'm very good at diffusing the situation. I've learned over the years, like I said, I'm non-confrontational, and B, I know right now if a fight breaks out and I'm not defending my wife's life or someone's life, chances are a judge is going to rule in the other guy's favor, not the guy who fights in a cage for a living, who in most people's mind probably has unresolved anger issues and likes to see blood. I'm not that guy, but that's the perception that a lot of people have of what a mixed martial artist is. So I'm not winning that court case ever. So I'm going to go ahead and stay out of those confrontations. And it's funny too. I get asked, like, people will be like, what's it feel like to walk into a place and just know that you're the biggest badass in the room, that you could beat up anybody in this room? And I'm like, actually, I never think about that. That thought has never once crossed my mind. And I'm glad that it hasn't, because, if I was a guy who I'm constantly honing my craft and I'm constantly getting better at fighting, and I walk into a room and I think about, man, that guy's 6'4", 220, but I know I could drop him to his knees. I got some, I got some issues that I need to resolve. For me, I'm like, hey man, I just want to be friends with people, and hey, watch my fight, because I'm going to go fight and pursue my calling and get paid for it, and put food on the table for my family.
You're a good dude, bro. I could tell when I first started following you. I'm like, dude, this dude's a good dude. Now, here's my question: what kind of daily pain and struggle do you go through to freaking get conditioned for a fight? If someone were listening to this, they don't want to necessarily fight, but they definitely want to look like a fighter. What would be a program or some sort of regimen that they could follow for 30, 60, 90 days to get them off to a good start?
I think the biggest thing is just making the commitment to yourself. I mean, obviously it works out well. We're talking now in December. Everybody's going to get their New Year's resolutions in order. And most of them are going to have to do with their physical appearance or finding their best selves. The biggest thing is don't make a goal that is going to be too hard to hit. If you want to be able to run 20 miles, don't run 18 miles your first day. Work on running around the block, work on taking a walk, take baby steps. And that's what I have to do. Even as a world-class athlete at the top of my game, in the top of the upper echelon at the UFC lightweight division, I don't go into training camp and go expect myself and my body to be able to go 1,000 miles an hour and be at peak physical shape, my distance, my timing, my footwork, my accuracy to be where it is every single day. You have to focus on success, not perfection. And when it comes to diet, when it comes to working out, man, sometimes not hitting that snooze button, waking up, going to the gym is a win enough to be able to gain momentum and start building the brick by boring brick in this fitness journey. For me, obviously it's very strict and it's very regimented. I eat only whole foods. I essentially just mix a lean protein with a vegetable a couple times a day. And I supplement perfectly with BCAAs, protein, beta alanine, omega-3s, and multivitamins, and get good sleep. And, the biggest thing obviously you have to take baby steps, but then once you get that momentum behind you, start pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. I am where I am today because of the amount of time that I've spent outside my comfort zone. And I think it has a lot to do with where I grew up. I grew up with comfort zones all around me, watching people work their 9 to 5 and make their honest living, but never quite get outside of their comfort zone. Always kind of living in that lukewarm state. And, once you start laying that foundation, just find new ways, new opportunities, new material to be able to follow to get outside of your comfort zone every single day.
You always have some sort of weird looking unit thing that you're swearing by. What is that thing?
Oh, the So Right?
Yeah.
The So Right? Man, so I guarantee however many listeners you have right now, there's 90% of them who at some point or another have had low back pain or they're constantly living with low back pain. And I was that guy. I was the guy since I was 14 years old. I was hunched over with my right leg in front of me in a staggered stance with my left leg behind me. And I wrestled on my right leg. So what I did to my muscle called the psoas, Psoas, anybody who's watching right now or listening right now, Google the psoas and Google psoas tightness and psoas release. I hurt my back or thought I hurt my back a couple of years ago. I was already living with chronic back pain. I saw orthopedic surgeons. They told me I needed surgery. They said herniated disc. They said a degenerative disc. They said arthritis. They said all these things. But really what it was a misalignment in my pelvic tilt and the psoas muscle on my right side, especially. I found this product, this tool, this self-massage tool called the Psoas, called the So Right, where you essentially lay on it and it just kind of moves into around your intestines and pokes in and starts to put pressure on your psoas muscle. You start moving your legs around, move your hips a little bit, and it started to lengthen and loosen up my psoas. And ever since then, I have not had back pain. I talked about me and Joe Rogan, I was on his podcast. We started talking about low back pain because everybody has low back pain. Turns out, that company had sold a decent amount, but then within that 24, 48 hour period of me getting on the Joe Rogan podcast, me talking about the So Right, going to so-right.com, we started talking about it. Their numbers just went through the roof. They sold like 100,000 units in a couple of days. And so I started talking to this company and they were like, hey man, we really feel, honored that you did this for us, man. We want to send you some money for helping us out. And I was like, man, I wasn't helping you out. I just truly believe in your product. And no, I'm not going to take the money. Don't send me any money. I don't deserve the money because I didn't do it for the money. I did it because I believe in your product. Thank you for creating this product. And then here we are a couple of years later. Now I do have a deal with them, but it all stemmed from a unsolicited non-ad that I ended up just talking about it. The product, and it was happenstance. And then they tried to send me money. And then they really loved the fact that I said, no, I don't want to just take your money because I didn't do it for the money. And then now I have a relationship with them and they've come out with some more products and it's a game changer, man. It really does help with low back pain because a lot of times it's not your back, it's your psoas muscle.
Well, Joe Rogan's got a little bit of time on me for his podcast. So maybe his listeners are a little bit deeper than mine, but my bomb squad's pretty loyal, bro. So where do these bomb squad people with low back pain go to get that? So you get it from pso-rite.com. So it's how will they know that it came from your podcast though?
So I don't actually have a code. And I think I do have a code. Actually, if you use Mike Chandler MMA as a code, I think there is a discount on there. Right now I know they're running a big Christmas special, obviously because it's Christmas, but type in Mike Chandler MMA. I believe you might get a discount.
Let's see if we can beat Rogan's numbers.
Dude, I believe it. I believe it. But I mean, yeah, he's a legend, man.
He's a beast, dude. He was doing that before anyone was. He was doing that before it's cool. Plus he's intelligent.
I know.
He's funny.
Yep.
I mean, he gets great guests. I mean, dude, Joe Rogan, dude, that's the guy. Like he's the Khabib for podcasting.
Exactly. It's cool. Like you said, but it's also, what did he do? It all goes back to what we talked about. Listen, he was Joe Rogan, of course. He had the platform. He had Fear Factor. He had that stuff. But he took a chance. He started talking into a microphone on these things called podcasts. And there was probably a bunch of people who were like, look at Joe, what an idiot, man, talking on a microphone. And now here we are a decade later, and there's millions of podcasts happening. So what did he do? He took a chance, taking a road less traveled during times where there was probably a lot of criticism. And now here we are talking about him probably never, ever has to lift a finger ever again. He can just talk into that microphone and make millions the rest of his life.
It's crazy. You know, when I started this podcast, I just had a lot of subject matter experts coming in here because I have a system that they go on to scale and train people and make a bunch of money. So I'm thinking, you know, all these big wigs are coming by. Why don't I get a couple microphones and talk, you know, pick their brain a little bit. So I got a couple microphones, and when they were in here filming, I'm like, hey, let me pick your brain a little bit. And the first one I released, people were like, dude, that was amazing, man. You guys were dropping bombs. So I'm like, let me go see if that website's available. And sure enough, Dropping Bombs was available. So I got Dropping Bombs. Now, dude, like I'm in definitely not as big as Rogan, but I'm in like the top in the entrepreneurial space. Hopefully that'll grow out. If you talk to your boy Rogan, dude, tell him I'd love to have him on my podcast, by the way. Now,
I will. And another thing I love that you do is obviously you do the podcast, but I love just your candid, grab the phone or hand the phone to somebody and just drop a quick bomb, or just maybe you're talking about nonsense. Maybe you're talking about whatever. Maybe it's whatever, but I love that you do it, because even if you're like, hey, I got an idea, I want to talk, you have so much knowledge inside of you. And I truly believe it. I've been watching you for a long time, even before we started, really making contact and talking about this and becoming friends, but you have a knack for you're an educator, you are a teacher, and you have this platform. And I love anytime you do a video. I even like it, maybe even more when it's a little bit more nonchalant, non-produced, and you're just like, hey man, let me just go ahead and talk real quick, because out of the abundance of the mouth comes the abundance of the heart, right? Or whatever that scripture is, and you're just like, hey, hit record and turn it into something. And it's always something great. So keep doing what you're doing.
I will. And by the way, again, I mean, like anybody that's listening to the Bomb Squad, go to pso-rite.com, correct?
Yes, sir.
SoRite.com if you have lower back pain. It's just this little mechanism that he does. Make sure you put Mike Chandler MMA in the bonus section, just again, so the company knows, dang, Mike's at it again. And maybe we can move some of those units. But more importantly, and I think this is the reason people, kind of resonate with me. I'm not sitting here saying it so somebody can make money. I'm saying it because if you got lower back pain, that could be debilitating in a lot of cases. It could be costing you time off, time away from your family, running around with your kids. But more importantly, you might be taking medication, and ultimately that stacks up. So if we can drop bombs on problems, even if it's lower back pain, that's the main reason I do it. The fact that you might make some money is just because, that's just a byproduct. But Bomb Squad, make sure you put in that code. SoRite calls him, SoRite calls him again and says, dude, what are you doing again? You need to go on more podcasts. Every time you go on podcast, we sell thousands of SoRites.
Yeah. Well, And I don't get anything from it. I think it's more just a discount code for me to be able to, give out to people who are interested in the product. I mean, I get a lot of Instagram messages from people that they just start talking about low back pain. I mean, we were not created to live in pain. We were not created to live as subpar human beings. We were created to live our best life. And you really can't do it if you're living in pain. Like you said, mentally, physically, spiritually, it just drains you, because it happened to me for a long time. And I was a less effective athlete because of it. And I am by no means 100% cured. I have to continue to stay on my SoRite, continue to work on my body every single day. But it sure is a game changer. It sure has helped.
Well, just looking at that thing, I wouldn't think I'd want it until you just described it. It looked like it looked like it was not what you just said it was. Fortunately, though, as all my friends growing up were wrestling, I quit wrestling the first day because, someone basically stuffed my nose into their armpit. And I'm like, that was ridiculous, dude. I literally flung his ass off me, got up, walked out. The coach was like, where are you going, Lee? And I'm like, dude, screw this. He literally had his armpit in my face for whatever amount of time. I'm not doing it. And it was sweaty and it was hairy and it's gross. I'm like, pass. Yeah. Next day, by the way, we weren't dressed. Next day, everybody came out in their little, those onesies. What are those called? The
singlets.
The singlets. Everybody came out in the singlets and we were all, I quit by then. So I'm watching these guys and they're coming out with their singlets and I was laughing at them. Little did I know those would grow up to be the badasses. Otherwise I would have stayed.
I will say that is, number one, a singlet is somewhat of a barrier to entry to a high school kid. I mean, no kid necessarily wants to be wearing that. You're growing through puberty. You're looking down like, hey, is my wiener big enough? Like, what's it look like? Like, let's be real. All 14-year-old kids are thinking about that. So they have since moved to a shorts and a dry fit shirt, which I actually like. At first I hated it. A good friend of mine, Ben Asker, was like, hey, I'm telling you, we need to reduce the barriers to entry. Wrestling is already the hardest, most physically demanding, most emotionally and spiritually demanding sport on earth. So naturally people aren't exactly drawn to it. And there is no huge upside. There is no NFL necessarily. There is no NBA. You're not going to make a ton of money being a wrestler. You have to love it. You have to love the armpits in your face to continue to do it. Reducing the amount of barriers to entry into the sport, which is, the idea of the singlet is something they're moving towards. And it's the best sport in the world. It turned me into the man that I am today. I wouldn't be the champion, the father, the husband, that I am today without the sport of wrestling.
Damn. Now I'm really bummed out that I quit. But you could have been one of us, Brad. You could have been one of us. Well, dude, I quit. And then, baseball, I went out for baseball. I either hit a home run or struck out, and it was mostly striking out. So I freaking ended up not, sticking with the baseball. I ran a 4.40 in football, believe it or not. Like, that's fast. Nice. I didn't know it at the time.
That's very fast.
Yeah. So I was gifted as an athlete, but I had no parenting or proper coaching to keep me focused. So basically when I wanted to quit, like most kids do, nobody, educated me or guided me back to it. So unfortunately I never became an athlete. However, all my athlete buddies, they're all using Psoas. They're walking around with these knee braces in the gym. The other day I was walking I was in the gym with my buddies and, they're always wearing these braces and all this crap on themselves. And they walked by and then they told me, they said, hey bro, why don't you put a little weight on that deal? I said, well, last time I put a little weight on it, I started getting real sore. And he said, well, that's what you're supposed to do. And I'm like, I don't understand. The body tells you like through pain, don't do that. I think that's God's way of letting us know not to hurt ourselves. So when there's pain, that's like a dummy light saying, no more of that. So I listen to my body, man. I don't make myself go through pain. Now, I also don't look like a Greek Adonis, but I'm also not 7 surgeries in. My buddy, Zach, he's in MMA, black belt jiu-jitsu, wins all the championships in jiu-jitsu, goes and trains with all the MMA guys. He's had like 6 neck surgeries. Like, come on, man. Would you rather go through that surgery and pain just to push through? How do you get through that mindset?
I will say, once you hit your dream to a star and once you know like what your purpose is on earth, for me, it's never really been an option. It's never really been a choice. And once I got in so deep and it's been revealed to me so many times that this is God's best for my life, this is God's calling on my life, I'm willing to go through it all. I'm willing to risk it all. There's studies out there that say we're, obviously taking, damage to the brain, damage to the head. There's obvious damage to the body. Yesterday, I kicked in the leg so hard. I woke up this morning feeling like I got ran over by a truck. But that's what gets me excited. If you aren't excited about the pain that you got to go through a little bit, this sport's not for you. If you don't get excited about all the work you have left in front of you, maybe you got to ask yourself, do you truly deserve the success? And different industry is different. Your industry is different than mine. Yours may be late nights, early mornings, tons of phone calls. Mine is more physical. Yours is more kind of just getting after it and all the different business things that you have to do. But you are setting yourself apart and you're willing to put yourself through things that I'm not willing to put myself through on a daily basis. It's the same goal. The path just looks different. For me, like I said, when I realized that this is my calling on my life, I was willing to try to move heaven and earth to get to where I want to be. Because I will tell you right now, I knew I would get to this part of my career eventually. I'm 34. I'll be 35, next year. I have a lot of gas left in the tank, a lot of tread left on the tires, but I am closer to the end than I am the beginning of this career. And there will come a time, Brad, when I take those gloves off for the last time and I lay them in the center of the octagon, and I'm going to be in some arena somewhere, and I'm going to have to go back to the locker room and shower for the last time, and I have to look in the mirror. I'm going to have to look at myself, and I'm going to have to ask myself, Michael, did you do everything that you possibly could with the gifts that God gave you? And when I get to that point, I just want to be able to answer honestly and without regret. And that's my goal every single day, is to do everything that I possibly can, leave no stone unturned in my preparation, so that I can do the best that I possibly can and become the best that I possibly can with the gifts that God gave me. So yeah, I'm willing to go through whatever it takes to become the best version of Michael Chandler that God created.
And that's why you're a champion. And folks, that translates into business. You know, you might not have to go to the gym 100 times and get your face crushed in to reach your goal, but that is kind of what you have to do. From an analogy perspective, same thing. You might have to miss some birthdays. You might have to talk to people you don't like. You might have to get up early, stay late, grind through. It's not always comfort, and it's not always glamorous, and most people miss that. It's like every time you see these people with abs and these kick-ass bodies, you see them at the club, or you see them at the mall, or you see them on TV. You don't realize they're spending 2 or 3 hours in the gym. They're passing on that donut that you're not passing on. You don't see the work people put in. It takes work, 100%. Like the other day, I was walking by. Those buddies at my gym, they always mess with me. They said, "Hey, lift up your shirt. Let's look at those abs." Started laughing. I said, "Open your wallet. Let's check out your bank."
Yeah.
Like you want to SWAT, you want to compare abs. Let's compare bank accounts right after that.
Exactly.
To me, my abs are my bank account, right? Now,
and it's your passion.
Yeah. Not only that, but like people say, well, you're not going to be able to defend yourself. I said, dude, my bank account, I'll hire freaking Mike Chandler and freaking Conor McGregor to follow me around. But now you guys are going to be getting paid so much, dude, you guys wouldn't even do it. Conor's got proper 12 whiskey. I mean, there's so many endorsement deals. Like, that guy's set up for life. I don't know how much you got already, fighting in the Bellator. Probably they don't pay very much over at Bellator.
No, actually, I will say Bellator coincidentally is a smaller organization, but to the right guys, once I said, once you become an indispensable asset to a property, to a business, you get paid top dollar. So I was making good money in Bellator, probably better than a lot of the top lightweights in the world. And now coming over to the UFC, doing well as well. So
why doesn't Dana just buy Bellator?
There's actually a class action lawsuit going on right now with, the idea of the UFC being a monopoly. The UFC did buy Strikeforce. Whenever Strikeforce built up, they bought Pride. Pride was a Japanese organization that had a lot of fighters. So there's a class action lawsuit going on. I'm happy with this industry. I'm happy with the way it is. There's a lot of people who talk about fighter pay. There's a lot of people. And once again, you go back to the people who say, man, that guy, that promotion, those people, they shouldn't be making that much money, right? They shouldn't be making that much money. And once again, you're like, I look at it from the standpoint of gratitude. I didn't even know Dana White. His name was not on any of my checks that I have made over the last 11 years before I signed with the UFC, but indirectly, his name was etched in every single cent that I made over the last 11 years, because he built this industry. He bootstrapped this industry. He quarterbacked this industry and turned it into a worldwide sports franchise and made the UFC what it was. And then you had Strikeforce, Bellator, these other organizations come along and do well because of the notoriety that Dana White brought about. So So to that question, no, it's almost one of those things where it would be a big no-no if Dana did that. He needs the competition. I think we all need the competition. Right now, the UFC is talking about cutting 60 guys. They got 600 something people on their roster. We need these other organizations as a whole, as a sport. You can't just have one big dominant brand, because then you can see suppressed wages. You can see all of those things that people may be talking about. But for me, man, I love the landscape of mixed martial arts. I love the sport of mixed martial arts, and I love what Dana White has done with the UFC.
Are you guys allowed to take sponsorships? Like, if I wanted to plaster my company's name across your shorts, are you guys allowed to do that? I don't see much of that anymore.
Not in the UFC. So we were able to do that in Bellator. So in Bellator, I always had, about 6 sponsors on my shorts. Bellator allows that. The UFC, I think 7 years ago, they did the Reebok deal. The only thing you're allowed to have is Monster Energy, which I'm a Monster Energy athlete. So I will have Monster Energy on my shorts, and I'll have my name, and I'll have UFC, and I'll have Reebok. And then they just signed a new deal with Venom, which is a mixed martial arts clothing brand, and they won't let any other sponsors on the shorts, I believe, as of right now. But yeah, you could do that in Bellator. You could do that in One Championship, PFL, the other organizations, just not the UFC right now.
Interesting. And then last thing, my man, because I wanted, you're more educated in the old faith than I am. I'm having a big thing lately. I don't know if you saw some of my posts about the name Jesus.
Yep.
Now
I've heard you talk about it, and I said, dang, I hope he doesn't ask me that question.
Well, yeah, because dude, listen, all I know is the scripture says, seek and ye shall find, right?
Yep.
It doesn't say, listen to what your dad told you and you shall find, or listen to what the pastor says and ye shall find. It says, seek. Seek is not listening. It's looking. So I'm looking. And the reason I'm looking is because, obviously I want to find answers, but his name was Yahshua. If that translated to today, it would be Joshua. So where'd Jesus come from? And I already know the answer, but most people that are saying, praise Jesus, Jesus is my Lord and Savior and all that. Why do people refuse to call him his name?
I don't know the answer to that question. And I number one, I want to commend you for, really living it. You say, seek and ye shall find, and you've asked this to numerous people. And I love that you're doing it and you're trying to figure out the answer. Unfortunately, I'm not the guy who's going to be able to give it to you. I'm not the guy, I don't really have, really whenever you said that was one of the first times that I had actually heard that, and tried to do my own research, and I didn't really come up with much, to be honest with you.
Well, it is factual. His name is Yahshua.
Yes.
That's the equivalent of Jesus. God is Yahuwah or Yahweh. But let's just keep Jesus for now. His name is Yahshua. Now, just like if you said, Brad, I'm going to come help you out, and I'm going to come, do whatever I need to do to protect you and let you raise your family. And all I want is for you to give praise to my name. Tell everybody Michael Chandler helped you. And then, 1,000 years later, everybody was saying Mickey helped you. Now you were like, no, it's not Mickey, it's Michael. Because a lot of people say, Brad, it doesn't matter as long as he knows. Well, if it doesn't matter, why so many scriptures talk about how important his name is? It says, my children will know my name. And I'm like, if that's the case, and so many people think his name's Jesus when it wasn't, and this isn't maybe, this is factual. His name was not Jesus, and his name didn't translate from Jesus or from Yahshua to Jesus either. That's not a translation. Otherwise, it would be Joshua. So for some reason, there was somebody's effort to have us stop using his name, and I don't understand. And I'm looking, so I'm asking anybody faith-based. If you're out there listening, you can give me an answer. Shoot it to me. You've never been told that.
No, I haven't. The funny thing is, the first time you said that, I mean, I've heard it. Even right now, I've heard it, praises to Yeshua. I've heard it, and of course there's a ton of, I think the idea of names is used a lot in the Bible, right? Strong tower, Waymaker, all these different names. I mean, those are more like, I guess, I don't know what you want to call them, but they're symbol. It's almost symbolism. Strong tower. Obviously, God is your rock. He is your strong tower. So this idea of names is just a different thing. It's something that you when you're reading scripture, and then there's a bunch of different cross references, and there's a bunch of different Bibles, and there's a bunch of different versions of the Bibles, and there's a bunch of different translations. And I will say that's one of the hardest things about Christianity is that obviously if you just break it down to nuts and bolts, you got God, and his son came and he died on the cross, and then everything else happened. But there's been so many different translations and so many different things that are it is confusing.
And omissions.
Like
exactly. Go look up the Lost Book of Thomas. just didn't make the Bible. And there was a book of Thomas. So I'll leave you with this because I know, dude, that you're for real. Like, you should look into this. But the equivalent would be like if your name was Michael Chandler and 1,000 years from now everybody's calling you Mitchell Chuckler. It's not your name. And it wasn't translated, it was changed. Now, if that's the case, my question is why? Now, if you think why in your head, well, who knows why? But think about this. The 10 Commandments, one of them is, thou shalt not take thy Lord's name in vain. Am I right?
Yep.
Okay, if you look up the word vain to where its original meaning, vain means to make meaningless or useless. That's what it says. Don't make my name meaningless or useless. That's one of his commandments. Please, there's only 10 things I'm asking. One of them is don't make my name meaningless and useless. So if you just take that as it is, because that's exactly what the commandment says, how much more meaningless and useless can you make a name by not using it?
Should change it. Yeah. Not just not use it, but change it. Yeah.
Just straight up not use it. So the whole world, he said, don't make my name meaningless and useless. So everybody just stopped saying it altogether. That's the most useless it can be. So that's why when someone says praise Jesus, I always say, Yahshua, my friend. Now, if I'm wrong and I die, forgive me. But at the end of the day, I'm just looking at scripture, man. I'm just looking at scripture, trying to find my way through. It says, seek and ye shall find. I'm on that Google looking. So if anybody in the bomb squad can help me out, let me know. Michael, if you bring this subject up with any of your mentors or people that have the answer, go ahead. But the number one, people tell me don't fall for this one, is it doesn't really matter as long as he knows you're talking about him. Well, if it doesn't really matter, why was it in the scripture 7,000 times? Why so many scriptures and verses tell us to give praise, sing praise, call upon his name? His name is his gift to us. You ever read that scripture?
Yep.
So it's like, sounded like it was pretty important to him. I'm not one to 2,000 years later start making it up that, he didn't really care. You can call him Chuck as long as you know he's talking about him. You can call him Chuck if you want. Doesn't matter. His name doesn't matter. Well, again, I'm listening to that to a human being. I'm gonna go back and look at that scripture. One of these days we got to jump on here and just do a whole episode on Bible study.
I'm down with that. I will seek. I will ask a couple of my mentors, spiritual mentors. I'll ask my pastor. I'll see what they come up with, and I'll text you.
And then last thing,
the bomb squad. There's got to be someone out there in the bomb squad who can help you out too.
There is. And then lastly, go just look up the Council of Nicaea. What happened in 325 with Emperor Constantine? That's where it starts to get tricky. Michael, I appreciate your time. I know you got to go work out. You've given me more than you already promised. Bomb Squad, listen up. Go follow him, at Michael Chandler on IG. Look him up, MichaelChandler.com. Go get the So Right if you have any lower back pain. And whatever you do, whenever you see him fight, man, log in, buy that fight, and support him in any way possible, because I guarantee you're looking at the next 3-time UFC champion as well. Michael, I appreciate you, bro. You're a good dude.
You, Brad. Thank you.
Thanks for coming, man. Call me if you need anything. You got my cell phone. You got my text, dude. Anything I can do for you, let me know.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it.
Peace.
You too.
Peace.
Thanks.
Folks, make sure you go follow him. And as always, share this out, hit the subscribe button, and keep it real.
Dropping bombs with the real Brad Lea. Subscribe now.